What's going on, guys? It's Bromley at Empire Barbell. Today we are going to talk about Jim Wendler's Beyond 531. For those of you that have commented on how filthy my whiteboard is, the one in my office is really bad. I recommend that if any of you invest in whiteboard paint, make sure you sand the wall down first. If not, cleaning it is going to be like getting crap out of a Brillo pad. It is not fun or effective. Real quick, guys, our t-shirt store is live at the bottom. We have Empire Barbell shirts, as long as our new dog gym shirts for those of you pet lovers. We have a lot of designs coming up. We have one live right now, and then we're going to grow. So even if you don't buy anything, just click on it, take a look at the logos. Let me know what you think, because we're constantly making changes as we go. So I appreciate everybody's support. Thank you in advance for that. So right now we're going to get into Beyond 531. I put up a video a couple weeks ago about the base 531 and some of the feedback I got from people who were a little more involved in the school of Wendler than I am. They made statements like I wasn't up to date, or I was saying things, or reviewing pieces of the puzzle that Wendler no longer recommends. The perspective I come from is one not just as somebody who puts out content, but somebody who spent the last 20 years receiving content. So I tend to filter things through what I think the individual's experience is going to be with the system, with a lifting personality, with a specific piece of information. So the reality is that if somebody hears about 531, gets interested in it, and goes to a Lift Vault to get a template, or goes to a Reddit forum, or ends up buying the book from the store, because remember, the 531 second edition, it's still up on Wendler's store, on Elite FTS, on Amazon. They're not likely to buy everything that's ever been published by Wendler. They're not likely to go research everything that he's ever put out. So I think you absolutely can review and talk about older publications that are still widely used and widely referenced today. Every time Wendler throws in an add-on or makes a change or whatever, it doesn't necessarily automatically apply to his older works when his older works are routinely being used and it's still being sold in store. If it was an actual complete revisal, I feel like he would have revised it into a third edition, which he hasn't. Also, with Beyond 531, in his own words, this is one of the last things I wrote for this book, and one of the biggest training breakthroughs I've had. I'm thankful I put Beyond in the title of this book, because this new training program has nothing to do with the 531 program. The principles are the same. The sets and reps don't lend itself to a catchy name. It definitely has its roots in 531, but like a death metal band that claims Black Sabbath as its influence, this program has taken on a shape all of its own. So I take that to mean that these later books, 531 Forever that comes after this, which makes me think of Batman Forever. I don't know why you choose that as a title. But anyways, I see these as add-ons, so I am reviewing them as add-ons. In the last few years, we've probably had 10 people run 531 or use that as the base of their training. Not a single one of them has ran the more updated versions. They've all ran the older versions. So 531 came out about 10 years ago. To you newer guys, that seems like forever ago. I'm telling you, that wasn't that long ago. It's still pretty new as a program and a training system. And it's gotten so popular and so ubiquitous that the original manual, I mean, even the first edition, I still see people use and reference. It's everywhere. So that's why I put that video out. That's why I reviewed it on its own. This is not a crash course in anything Wendler has ever written. I am reviewing these books individually on their own, because that's how people are going to come across them. So anyways, getting into Beyond 531. We start out with the basic 531 that is present in second edition, which again is still available, it's still sold. So in the past, I've really just focused on this as the money set, because that's really the only important set. At these percentages, if you're going off of 90% of your training max, this will be like a set of 12, these plus sets, or the sets you take to failure. This will be like a set of 9, 8 or 9. This will be a set of like 6 or 7. So you're talking about one set all out that's going to end up with some higher repetition range, and every cycle you add a little bit of weight and you try to break those numbers, and that is what drives progress. It's a neat take. It's proprietary. It's a neat take on a linear progression. It's just unique enough while being kind of simple enough and brandable enough that Wendler can put his stamp on it. So this is a proprietary part of 531. 531, very simple, very, very easy to understand. He uses these warm-up sets, which again, they don't contribute to the overall training volume. They're very easy sets, but they fit into the 531 warm-up progression. He uses these to base this new work off of, which isn't present in the original 531 manual. So we go into Joker sets, and then Pyramid first set last, which is basically the back-off work you do. It's where most of your volume comes from. So anyways, we go into the original 531, and then we have Joker sets, which he waits quite a bit into the book to explain. Basically, it just means working heavier. So if you get up, you're 65, 75, 85, and then you hit your rep PR there, and then you just keep getting heavier. It's maybe increase 5%, maybe increase 10%, maybe do a set of 5 or 3, maybe work up to a single. There's a lot of variability there. And in my mind, it goes to show that the training, the important training stimulus, is just getting exposed to the heavier weight. He doesn't have a set method of progression for these. The way that the root of 531 has a very calculated, consistent, concise method of progression, this isn't prescribed as strictly. Now, he does cite Bulgarian System and John Bros. For those of you that don't know, John Bros is I think he's a Las Vegas weightlifting coach. He coached Pat Mendes. Influenced by the Bulgarian System, he trained under, I forget the guy's name, but he had the snatch record for like years. Bulgarians are nasty. Bulgarian System is basically max every day, often at the expense of form and technique. Your job, okay, today we have a clean and jerk. You're going to hit a 1 kilo PR if it kills you. That's your job. That's what you're here to do, even if it takes you 20 attempts. And it's high frequency, which means that's a daily occurrence. It's not just today, and then you do it again next week. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Maybe they'll rotate the movements around. John Bros is a squat every day fan, so he recommends working up to a squat training max every day. And it's brutal. And they talk about this thing called the dark times, where your endocrine system is actually adapting to the high levels of stress, so your adrenal glands actually grow over time. But before you get to that point, you like suffer from like depression and disillusionment, and it takes like a year and a half to adapt. And I guess the guys that come out the other side, it's like walking upstairs, to where every other mere mortal, it's like devastatingly brutal as a training effect. So it's a nasty system. But keep in mind, again, are we trying to produce a few world champions out of this pool of lifters, or are we trying to legitimately find best practices for everybody? Because those are different things. Bulgarian System is take a bunch of eggs, chuck them against the wall. The eggs that don't break are your world champion. So if you have a lot of lifters and they're disposable, you can take your liberties with breaking lifters in half. Because for the ones that don't break, they're going to get the strongest, the fastest that way. So, for instance, trying to do 4 days a week of maximal training, where Westside only does 2. It's upper body and lower body. That's a lot of exposure to heavy weights. I think a lot of people are going to run themselves ragged, specifically when it comes to trying to fit maximal squats with maximal deadlifts in the same week. Just from my experience, not even from running this, but just from my experience in trying to make squats and deads fit together in the same training microcycle, in the same training week, that is tricky. It's hard. People respond entirely different to the deadlift, one person from the next. You have people that are made of cable, steel cable, and they can do anything and they're fine. And you have other people that if they're within 6 days of each other, one lift is going to suffer. So I do not, just off the bat, I'm going to tell you, I do not recommend trying to hit joker sets week in, week out with squatting and deadlifting in the same week. That sounds like bad news. I'm sure some of you, like low intermediate guys, might have had some good results, but there's going to be a point where your lifts get higher and as you advance where that's not going to be tenable, and you need to know why. Okay, so right now I'm telling you that is the brick wall you're going to run into if you try to take this to its ultimate conclusion and you don't get tricky with the way you move around it. So those are the joker sets. So we have this working up, we have this pyramid form where we're working up, you hit the 85%, and then you're going up, you hit your joker sets, and now we're going down to the back off sets. That's where this pyramid or first set last is. I mean, it's a neat mode of explaining it where you just repeat back to these lighter percentages. I think these percentages are completely arbitrary. The pyramid versus a first set last, literally the only difference is pyramid means you would go 85, maybe hit your joker sets, then go back 75, then 65. Again, these are not heavy enough or substantial enough to really contribute to overall training volume. So first set last is just drop back to 65% and do as many as possible. So I mean, I would recommend just doing that. It's a different training threshold. High reps on compound movements are great sparingly, if you use them sparingly, but you attack them. They can increase capacity and endurance, and they can actually grow muscle, and they can make you more resilient, and it can round out. One thing that's apparent about this is they're trying to check as many boxes as possible. You got your medium strength range that you're going all out on. You got your maximal range that you're getting exposure under. You got your volume, so now we're getting more volume with these back off sets, and you got even a very high rep all out set. So it's like pretty much, it's almost a form of concurrent training where you're hitting all thresholds simultaneously. And then first set last for multiple sets, it's just, instead of just doing that for all out, you would just hang out there and do 3 to 5 sets of 5 to 8 reps, which is just an analog for boring but big. I mean, instead of doing 5 sets of 10, you do 5 sets of 8, 4 sets of 6, whatever it is. Again, not a lot of specific recommendations there. Wendler is very loose and very open with how you do it. At some points, his recommendations almost take such a lackadaisical approach that it's almost like, do what you want, I don't care. One thing he writes, now I know this can get a bit confusing because a lot of training is auto-regulated and the decisions on what to do is entirely based on how you feel that day. You are welcome to choose whatever exercise you want. This is a program that is for lifters that know what they need and will address these needs with the proper assistance work. So again, we're shifting away from this simple program that casts a wide net to doing what's necessary for the individual. I'm a little torn with that recommendation because while it is true, you as a lifter are on the hook for finding best practices, there's a point where the book itself, the system itself, fails to make recommendations or even to give you the philosophical insight as to why you might make one recommendation over the other and just puts the ball in your corner. So it's not necessarily wrong information, but we're now outside of the realm where Wendler, his philosophy, 531, anything you read in here is going to help you make those better decisions. This very much feels like just a big toolbox. And there's a lot of moving pieces, but it's kind of up to you to figure out which ones work best and why. So I would actually recommend, it's not that any of this is bad or it doesn't work or whatever, there's actually a lot to the way this is structured that I am a big fan of if we're looking at individual training structure of each workout. I would strongly recommend, if we're talking about how it goes together in the week and then week to week, follow this up with a supplementary book like practical programming or something that talks more about recovery, which stage lifters tend to recover better, recover worse, how to kind of determine that. There's a lot of insight that you need to have before making this work for yourself. So unless you take the scenic route, which is what I did, which is try it out. If it doesn't work, make tweaks and figure it out as you go. That's also an option. Now, I also talked about kind of the confusion because we talked all about this, and then we go into beyond 531, which you don't realize really is like a different thing until like halfway through the book, which makes you wonder why you're spending all this time with the root of 531. It prescribes all the warm-ups leading up to 100%, which is your training max. And they recommend you start your training max at 85% now, which is further confusing when you're trying to keep your best numbers in your head. To failure, again, it's an AMRAP set. Do as many as you can, and then you progress into the Joker sets, and then you drop into whatever back off work you want to do to get most of your volume in. The one thing that stands out is that the progression week to week is not very clearly explained. So I actually had to read it a couple times because, again, the root of 531, it is run through, hit your rep PRs, next cycle, add 5 to 10 pounds, repeat. This is the same pattern of following 3 weeks and then increasing your training max, but you're staying, as best I can tell, at this percentage for those 3 weeks. So it's a form of step loading. So with the same weight each week, you're trying to beat your training max. So it doesn't wave this way. It's step loaded. So it would be this 85%, 85%, 85%, and then you add in, you either deload or you just add in that training, that increased training max and repeat. So then you go into the Joker sets, which now you're going above your training max, which begs the question of why we have to use this fake percentage anyways. Why can't we just get people to use their actual goddamn training max? Whatever. So now you're at 150%, which should be more representative of an actual max, and then you do your back off work. So the book is dense with a bunch of cleverly named variations in an attempt to like further brand 531 and like the world he's building around it. And they're viable and they're useful for just variation for the sake of it. But what the book is missing is deeper insight as to why you would pick one over the other. Is it variation for the sake of it, which you absolutely need? A lot of times variation after so many cycles is just do a different split, do a different rep protocol, do a different progression. You just need something varied to continue further adaptation. Sometimes the variation has to fit a specific need. It has to solve a problem. And there isn't a lot of discussion about that. So I take a little issue with that, the buckshot approach of here's a dump of information of all the different pieces of the puzzle without a lot of insight into what's more or less appropriate based off where you are. Reading through it, it just feels a little manic and kind of scattered. It doesn't feel like it leaves you with a really good idea of what Beyond 531 is. It's a little confusing. So I read through it a few times and kind of separated this out, that you have your base 531 with the variations you can add in after, and the main difference with the beyond aspect is it's more emphasizing the maximal sets. So it's working up heavy, dropping back, getting your back off volume. Now, on the topic of branding, this is where we get into this trouble of how much can you brand something that is not proprietary to you. So like everybody calls 5 sets of 10 boring but big. So that's great for him that he was able to kind of label that, and now people will kind of know that as a Wendler protocol. 5 sets of 10 is one of the oldest protocols in existence. I remember the 5 and dime routine, 5 sets of 5, 5 sets of 10. 5 sets of 10 has been like the hypertrophy prescription since like the 1950s. So when I see something like this is the program, work up to a heavy single, drop back, do some repeating back offsets, that's not proprietary to Wendler. Like it just isn't. That's a way of training. It's a good way of training. I like it. But I have a problem calling that anything 531 because in his own words, it's such a big deviation from the very simple, and I would say very necessary training protocol that he came up with. I mean, this solved a lot of problems. It's easy to remember. It's prescribed. At every turn, your moves are prescribed. You don't have to think. You don't have to insert your own decision making. And anytime somebody's running this specific progression that is unique to Wendler, okay, we're doing 531 now. Now we're branching out all these different ways of training that are not rooted in simplicity. They don't have very specific instructions. A lot of the decision making is laid at your feet. You're responsible for making the changes to go up, go down, hit your failure set, don't hit your failure set, do this back off work, do that back off work. And there's a point where we're just talking about training. We're just talking about how people train. And working up heavy and dropping back, that's not proprietary at all. So it doesn't change whether it's valid or not. That's just, I feel like it's important for you guys to know that there really is nothing new under the sun. But I'm not a Wendler hater. I like a lot of the information in here. As a standalone training structure, I like the way that that's placed together. I would prefer that there would be a more comprehensive way of fitting in all of these different compound exercises without them bumping up against each other, because I promise you they will. Eventually they will. And you need to have the tools to be able to know how to navigate that. So make sure you guys read as much as you can, watch as many videos as you can. You really have to ask yourself every time you do something like this, what comes next? Next workout, next block, next training year, what comes next? And when you hit a wall, you have to know what plan B is. Don't just jump to something radically different. Make the smallest intelligent change you can make that's going to give you the best handle on the program. Smallest change you can make that allows you to continue growing. Summary of Beyond 531. I wouldn't even call it a logical progression of 531. Like Texas method is a logical progression of starting strength. This is definitely more advanced. It's definitely more strength specific. But going from base 531 to that, I get a little whiplash. Doing light AMRAP sets 4 days a week to doing maximal training 4 days a week, I think it looks good on paper. I don't think it works quite as well in practice. I'm sure there's many of you that are going to try it and have good results in the beginning and say, I don't know what you're talking about. It's a fantastic routine. I'm just trying to come up with best practices for the whole. Okay. On average, I think a lot of people are going to run into a brick wall within a cycle or two if they try to run 4 maximal days across 4 different compound lifts. That's my 2 cents. Based on what I saw here, I'm not quite sure at the moment if I'm going to dig into 531 forever or not. As somebody who produces content, I have to be very self-critical about if I'm putting things out because I just need to fill up space, or if this is a thing that needs to be heard. I am not sold based on Beyond 531 that the system needs more versions, more iterations, more variety. Because like I said, this is dense with variety. So I'm not quite sure I'm going to dig into 531 forever because I don't think there's going to be anything groundbreaking or really necessary for you guys in there. But for now, keep it simple, guys. You don't have to make things excessively complicated. Understand what basic principles drive progress and make small tweaks as you go. You got a really good training structure to work on. Just use your critical thinking skills, expand your knowledge as much as you can. Make small changes as you go. You guys will be all right. It's like Ed Cohen said, it doesn't matter what you do. Just make it work. So thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley and Empire Barbell. I'll see you.